Our sixth and final team tonight, MyGrid, consists of Pooja, Damien, Mulvanah, Edward Carr, Ben Currell, and Victoria Mills. Together, they tackled the challenge area around energy security and reliability. And for their pitch, we'll be starting with their video first.
The frequency and severity of natural disasters in Australia is increasing. These events can leave rural communities without power for weeks at a time. How can we reimagine energy infrastructure to increase the resilience of regional communities? After consulting with impacted communities, emergency response teams, and energy suppliers, we have discovered the need for remote communities to have their own power supply and distribution network to reduce the impact of power losses.
Introducing MyGrid, an infrastructure collaboration delivering affordable microgrid solutions for vulnerable regional communities. The program includes community batteries, underground power lines, rooftop solar, medium-scale renewables, access to low-cost finance, regulatory expertise, and risk assessment.
By offering a suite of options to participating towns, MyGrid unlocks economies of scale, facilitating the transition of existing single-feeder vulnerable grids to flexible, secure and renewably powered microgrids.
To make this idea a reality, we need connections within the emergency services, utilities, governments, renewable developers and finance providers. From there, we'll engage a vulnerable community for a pilot-scale project. With your endorsement, we can reimagine energy infrastructure and protect high-risk rural communities.
Hello everyone, hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Pooja. The team decided to identify who was most vulnerable to power disruptions during natural disasters. We conducted interviews with stakeholders within the energy supply chain and emergency services, which led us to the conclusion that regional towns suffered more than those in populated areas. We found that these towns have little control over their own energy infrastructure. Many of these people are fiercely independent, yet rely on a single feeder, which, if disrupted, can leave them without power and basic services for days or weeks. This led us to the idea for MyGrid. It combines a variety of microgrid-based technologies. It makes those technologies accessible and allows communities to own them as part of increasing and encouraging independence. MyGrid is about increasing resilience to natural disasters, encouraging collaboration between regional towns and suppliers, and lowering barriers for adoption of new technology. I would now like to invite the judges to ask us questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump in, Nick. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I have a PhD student looking at exactly this right now, building resilience from disasters. So I'm sure she'd love to talk more and hear about your thinking. I'm interested though, I understand sort of taking away from that single line coming in, but how does the project improve the overall resilience? What's different about what you're offering a community in this way? What are the unique things that you're offering here?
Thank you for the question. So essentially, we are providing the town with multiple sources of power in the case of the grid supply being lost. So for example, by utilising underground cables to critical infrastructure such as supermarkets, hospitals, etc., we reduce the risk of the loss of electrical supply to these facilities because overhead poles are often damaged during disasters. We know that underground cables can be expensive, which is why we want to utilise them only for services that the town are considered critical. We also have a community backup specifically for these facilities. And we also want to encourage residents to install their own solar as well as batteries. And they would be sized for their household load, meaning that they have more control over how much electricity would be available to them in an emergency.
I'm always interested in the integration of tech into society and community. So I guess I am similar to the last group. I'm really interested in what do you see would be the biggest challenge to make this a success for a community and help build their resilience?
I think there are a few challenges for us to overcome. I think it'll be hard to include people that might not own their homes, prioritising towns based on the needs of the town versus the wants of the town. But I think the biggest challenge is getting funding allocation from government. A simple way to demonstrate the risk and convince government that MyGrid is valuable is to put numbers on costs and benefits. Although we can quantify costs to replace or repair electrical infrastructure, it's much harder to quantify the pain for towns that lose power, comms, refrigeration, healthcare, schooling, etc., including funding from emergency response budgets, private sponsorships, bulk discounts, and the like will help reduce this additional government funding required and hopefully make it easier to secure some funding.
So just building on that, is there, I mean, it sounds like in some ways there's a financial value proposition for communities to think about getting on board. When you start to quantify some of those, do you think it always will have to come from government to make something like this happen? Because in my mind, it's not always the best way to start a project. Have you thought about that from the point of view of what that looks like? And then I might go to the other judges if we've got time.
Yeah, hi, Peter. I think I'll touch on that question. Because obviously funding from federal and state governments is probably a big part of this solution, but we also believe that our proposed accessible low-cost finance option for house owners and electricity users can provide tools to allow the user to take control of their own electricity with repayments. They end up being about the same costs as of their power bills as they pay back the asset. Obviously, after that, it'll be very low cost. We also found that speaking to residents who were impacted by the recent heavy weather in the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne, that they would be happy to pay a little bit more for electricity, knowing that they were either paying back an asset owned by themselves or community, or something was being done to guarantee supply, aka underground power cables. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. I just want to see if one of the other judges would like to jump in. Simone?
Yeah, I was interested in whether you think there's a minimum size under which this would no longer be cost effective. Or to put it differently, is, you know, what size of community would this be best suited to?
That's not something I've thought of personally, but not really. I guess the larger the community, the easier it is to pay for things. Obviously, if we've all got a shared feeder and there's more of us, we can pay for it more easily. I suppose with smaller communities that are of higher risk, that's where we'll need some assistance from federal and state governments to help out with funding. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, team. I think that's all. I think that's all the time we've got. I'm going to hand back to Nick. Thank you very much and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Team MyGrid, for that amazing pitch. And again, thanks to the judges for their insightful comments.